Hello everyone and welcome to this demo. Today we're going to walk through the automated deployment of a single host edge site in VCF Edge 9.0 environment. This PowerShell script is designed to streamline the deployment process from initial creation of a vSphere cluster to the creation of the supervisor, deploying the Argo CD supervisor service, and finally deploying an Argo CD instance on top. So we start with this KB article. Here we can see at the bottom we have this OneNode deployment zip file. We first download the OneNode deployment.zip file and extract it to our environment that has connectivity to our Edge vCenter. The OneNode deployment.ps1 is the main script responsible for the deployment. It leverages VCF PowerCLI commandlets and relies on pre-configured JSON input files, the infrastructure.json and the supervisor.json file respectively, to tailor the deployments to your specific environment. Before we dive into the JSON files, let's quickly go over the prerequisites for this automation. Here, we can see that we have a README file available as well. We open this README file and we can see the prerequisites mentioned. You'll need a VCF 9 environment with a vCenter instance, specifically supervisor version 900.0100. The host should already be prepped with ESX and have the appropriate networking setup, ensuring ESX and vCenter network connectivity. It's also crucial that connectivity is available from the provisioning host to the supervisor management network. The data center defined in infrastructure.json must already be created and the ESX image populated in the VLCM depot. Finally, you'll need PowerShell version 7 or above, kubectl, and VCF CLI installed on your system. As you can see, the functions performed by this automation. First, it handles the cluster creation and host addition, creating a new cluster in vCenter and adding your specified host. Next, it configures the cluster, setting DRS to automatic and disabling HA admission control. This script then proceeds to the creation of VDS and related port groups, establishing a VDS and all necessary port groups for Edge application and services. For storage, it performs the data store configuration by formatting an unformatted disk as VMFS with local storage, and then creates a storage policy for the Edge data store. Crucially, it enables the vSphere supervisor feature on the newly configured cluster and deploys the Argo CD supervisor service. Finally, it automates the Argo CD instance creation. Now let's look at the execution steps. First, we install the VCF PowerCLI module. We also install kubectl and VCF CLI if not already installed. The next critical step involves configuration. We will use the default Argo CD deployment.yaml file that will be used for deploying the Argo CD instance. Feel free to change the namespace in case you want to deploy Argo CD in another namespace. We also have this 1.01 YAML file, which is basically the Argo CD supervisor service YAML file that allows creating the Argo CD supervisor service. Then you'll configure the infrastructure.json file. Here you can see that I've already pre-filled these values. You'll update the fields like vCenter name, ESX host, data center name, and the network details. This file is where you define your vSphere configuration. Similarly, you'll configure the supervisor.json file, updating parameters related to the supervisor's networking, availability, and sizing. So here you can see that we've already pre-filled all the values here that are needed for deploying the supervisor. Finally, once all the prerequisites are met and your JSON files are configured, you'll run the automation script using a command similar to this. So we'll use the OneNode deployment.ps1 file and we'll pass in our infrastructure JSON file and our supervisor JSON file. Now before we run this command, let's take a look at what our infrastructure already looks like before running the script. We have a VCF 9 workload domain deployed with the default cluster. We can see that it has the supervisor enabled as well. We will now add our edge site cluster to this vCenter. So let's go ahead and run the script. It validates the JSON config file successfully. It asks for our vCenter password. It then asks for our ESX password, and then it starts with the validation. Here you can see that it's starting to create the Edge data store. Here it asks us for which disk I want to select. So in my case, I will use the third disk. You can see that the Edge cluster is not available, so it's starting the Edge cluster creation. If we go into our vCenter, we can see that our Edge cluster is getting created and our host is getting added to it. So you can see the add host is in progress, and you can see it has successfully added the host. It starts creating some tags. It sets up the HA and DRS settings, and it starts creating the network that's needed. So if we go back here, we'll be able to see the distributed port group gets created. And then we can see it starts creating the Edge supervisor. So if we go back into our vCenter and if we go into the supervisor management section, we can see that our Edge supervisor deployment has started. So now the supervisor API has been invoked And now the script is going to wait for the supervisor deployment to complete. So here we can monitor our supervisor. We can see that it's installing the agent. It's going to provision the supervisor. Here we can see that the supervisor is deployed successfully. And now we're creating the Argo CD supervisor service. If you look at the Edge supervisor, we'll be able to see that the Argo CD service is being configured. Here we can see that the Argo CD operator was successfully created. Now we're going to configure the VM classes that were defined in the JSON file. Now we're going to create the Argo CD context and VCF CLI. We're logging into the Edge supervisor. We can see that the contexts are now listed and the packages needed are automatically installed. Now we're deploying the Argo CD instance using the deployment.yaml file. Now we're waiting for the Argo CD pods to come up. So if we go into the vCenter and look at the namespaces in the Edge cluster, we can see that our Argo CD namespace has been created. And if we go into the compute section, we'll be able to see the pods as well. Now we wait for all the pods to come up. We can see that all the Argo CD pods are now ready and the script execution completes. This means that our single host Edge site is deployed successfully. So if you go back into the environment, you can see that the Edge cluster is deployed with a single host. And if we go into this namespace, we can see that our supervisor is deployed with a foundational load balancer and all the namespaces are created. You can see that the Argo CD supervisor service namespace with the Argo CD controller manager is deployed. So this operator is what deploys the Argo CD instance. And in our deployment.yaml file, we chose Argo CD as the namespace for deploying our instance. So we can see that the instance related pods have been deployed as well. Now let's try to access the Argo CD instance. So first, we check the services to see the Argo CD external IP. We can see that the IP is available here. We can see that Argo CD is reachable. So this concludes this demo on automated single host Edge site deployment using PowerShell script. You can use this script for deploying multiple Edge sites without any manual intervention, while ensuring all your Edge sites have a consistent configuration.